No! No, Martin! Look, I told you I'm sorry. It was an accident. I was trying to help. You don't help people. You use them.
Hey everyone, welcome to The Boss Fighter, and today we're going to be taking a look at the main antagonist from Insomniacs Spider-Man 1, Mr. Negative. Mr. Negative's story started the same as everyone else's. Born to a family of a loving mother and caring father, Martin Lee was blessed with a fortunate upbringing which granted him many luxuries, such as good education and mentoring. Martin was always an extremely bright and intelligent child who excelled in many of his academics and would even go on to study an art degree in his early adult years. Unfortunately for Martin, however, as he aged, an unknown physiological condition would develop and grow, prompting his family to seek guidance from two talented scientists, Otto Octavius and Norman Osborn. I can only really imagine how this would have made Martin feel, the anxiety of failing to live up to his family's legacy, the fear of becoming someone inferior, so vulnerable and weak. However, this cure comes at a cost. A price that will inevitably haunt Martin for the rest of his life and spark the foundations of a sadistic terrorist born from the energy designed to heal the most unfortunate. Martin Lee's experiment begins with Norman promising a cure using a sample of devil's breath, one of the most dangerous and unethical forms of treatment accepted by two desperate parents who wanted to save their child at any cost. What was unclear to them and everyone in that room were Norman's intentions. Norman willingly accepted Martin as a test subject under the suspicion of the reaction it would have on him. Martin Lee's experiment begins with reassurance and comfort, with his family and doctors telling him everything is going to be okay and to just relax. However, as the devil's breath enters his veins, Martin begins shaking violently and acting hysterical. His parents comfort him as his mother violently knocks on the window, demanding Norman to shut down the experiment and save her child. Unfortunately for his mother, those will be her final words, because when she goes back to Martin, he would violently explode in an AoE, killing his parents and traumatizing the helpless child manipulated by a selfish doctor, who delightfully celebrates his parents' death and the birth of a corrupted influence. Mr. Negative. Martin would be released, cured and alone as he was fostered in Manhattan, forging a hatred towards the man who never paid the price, the man who took everything from him. The man who manipulated a desperate family into a dance with the devil, who simply wanted nothing but to test his formula on the most vulnerable of victims. Lee's future was bright and prosperous. He would go back to China and create a multi-billion-dollar business out of the shopping industry. After his extreme success, he would return back to New York and build a home where all is welcome, a fortress where no one has to suffer the burden of loneliness. A community where everyone can gaze upon its sign and find comfort in Feast. Feast would bring Martin a sense of fulfillment and purpose. He would build a staff of optimistic employees who wanted nothing but to help and support the lives of the most unfortunate. Most importantly, May and Peter Parker, who would remind him of his humanity and fortitude lost in a moment of absolute despair and torment. However, as Martin roamed the halls of Feast, he would occasionally gaze upon the static, reminding him of Norman's election and his rise to glory. This would absolutely enrage Lee, because how could someone so evil, so cold-blooded be allowed to accept the most unworthy title? How could the man who killed his family and cursed his body go unpunished? As the question raced around his mind, his hatred for Norman Osborn would grow more and more, creating the foundations for a villainous path, plagued with sadistic actions. With his overwhelming wealth and rage, he would forge an army called the Demons, named after the mask his father used to taunt him with. However, every time Martin would advance his pursuit to destroy Norman and his empire, a question would always ponder in his mind. Can he let this go? Should he let this go? He's built a new family, a new community who respects him as a leader and looms to him for guidance and charity. Can he really abandon all of that in a pursuit of vengeance? Unfortunately for Martin, every time he revised the question, his anger and negativity would cloud his judgment, aligning his morals to a more ambiguous frame. Something I really love about this character is the duality between the two personalities. Martin is kind, innocent, and is selfless towards the people who need his help. However, Mr. Negative is the complete opposite. He's cold, full of rage, and feels completely comfortable with killing people if it will bring him closer to his goal. He often switches into his alter ego when initiating violence because Martin knows this quest is unethical and entirely selfish. A nice detail I really appreciate in this story is towards the end of the game we see Martin less and less as he becomes more and more guilty of his crimes and can only move forward as Mr. Negative. As the story progresses, he descends further and further down the path of villainy as his actions become more evil and twisted. He bombs the Norman Osborn rally and forces his crime syndicate across New York and feels completely comfortable with murdering a building of innocent civilians if it will bring him face to face with the man who took everything from him. The duality of Martin Lee and Mr. Negative is one of the more interesting character traits we see in any Spider-Man villain, because he mirrors Peter Parker in the complete opposite way. Instead of tragedy inspiring growth and evolution, for Lee it motivates a path of downfall and corruption. They both live double lives and have a secret identity they're desperate to hide, and most importantly of all, their alter egos represent different morals and ideologies. Lee's descent into madness only progresses as the story continues, with him becoming more and more relentless in his pursuit of vengeance. He becomes comfortable with killing innocent people, captures and tortures several civilians, and even causes the death of Jefferson Davis, a very important character whose death will spark the foundations of redemption within a man who understands and accepts his mistake. As we reach Act 3 in the story, it's revealed Martin has forged an alliance with Spider-Man's greatest foes, forming a Sinister Six, entirely composed of members who are engaging in acts of mayhem and carnage for their own selfish or somewhat desperate needs. One of my favorite abilities Lee possesses is the power of corruption. By just touching you, he can imprison you in a hive mind of your own personal insecurities and fears, making you question who you really are and challenging your greatest deceptions. When he touches Spider-Man in this amazing set piece, he gets transported back to the event of the Osborn rally, where he's tormented with the thought that Spider-Man could have prevented this. We see Mr. Negative demand answers and justifications for why he let these people rot and fade away into the ashes of his failures.
All the souls you've lost, the innocent victims you couldn't save.
Martin, their blood is on your hands!
Their bodies filled the gutters. You did nothing!
I can't save everyone!
What makes this even more interesting is it's vaguely implied Lee knows who Spider-Man is, which adds this whole new layer to his torment and allows him to manipulate Peter's mind even further. However, what Martin fails to realize is Peter is righteous. He's blessed with the strength and fortitude required to overcome the greatest traumas and tragedies that crushed men like Lee. Our final encounter with Mr. Negative in this story is definitely one of my favourites. The battle begins as we watch Lee confront the man who took everything from him as he cowers away afraid of the monster who lurks towards him, slicing his face, branding Norman with the curse he wrought onto an innocent child who watched helplessly as his parents laid before him, lifeless and alone. In a moment of extreme rage, he raises his blade, delivering the final blow until he is intervened by Spider-Man. I love this moment because we see Martin question this quest and if his crimes and actions really were justified in the grand scale of the conflict. However, Peter is blind to the cries of a lonely child and deaf to the screams that reverb in Martin's mind. Peter and Mr. Negative battle in what can only be described as a desperate brawl of redemption, with Spider-Man seeing the light and good within Martin and wanting to help him overcome his internal darkness. Yet Lee is fierce, he fights like a ferocious animal trying to redeem his parents, dashing across the room where this all began. As the battle escalates, the stakes are raised as Martin transcends, becoming a pure manifestation of pain and anger, turning into the very monster his father's stories would depict. Most stories of villainy would normally end here, a lost cause with no redemption in sight, yet Lee is a little different. As he would spend the coming years in solitary confinement, Martin would adapt and slowly embrace the one truth he's been confronted with his entire life: acceptance. Acceptance for his parents' death, acceptance for his crimes, acceptance for letting his internal traumas manipulate a noble leader into a sinister tyrant. Throughout Spider-Man 2, we learn that Martin has completely abandoned the path of Mr. Negative and embraced something much different. He's become a man of ambiguity, neither a hero nor a villain. However, someone who definitely can't be trusted and still delightfully torments the minds of the undeserving. In the level No Escape, we play as Miles Morales, who was captured and imprisoned by Kraven the Hunter and forced to navigate his fortress. Unfortunately for his foes, it's revealed most have been imprisoned by the Hunters, most likely dead. However, one prisoner remains. As we progress through the level, we eventually reach a Colosseum greeted by his greatest nemesis. Miles gazes upon the man who took his father from him in a cold-blooded display of anarchy that torments them both daily. In this encounter, Lee is more deadly and ruthless than he's ever been. His attacks are more ferocious, his blows are more fatal, and most importantly of all, the duality of Martin Lee and Mr. Negative has been completely fused. Both personalities battle as one. As we near the end of the fight, Martin imprisons Miles in a nightmare reminiscent of the one we saw Peter confront in the last game. However, this time is different. Instead of questioning his role of a hero, Miles battles the feeling of failure.
Always gone. Always in danger.
No,
You're going to get yourself killed.
won't.
And then what? You can't win, Miles. I should never have let you try. All it's ever done is make me more alone.
Lee challenges Spider-Man on what it means to be Miles Morales until he discovers his father's identity and realizes who the man behind the mask really is. This defining moment leads to Mr. Negative reflecting on his crimes and realizing he was no better than the man who stole his parents from him, which leads to him saying his name in a confused stutter, trying to make sense of the revelations unfolding before him. For all those years, he's justified his crimes with the ignorant belief of vengeance, however, never does he once realize that his actions have consequences. And even if they did, he wouldn't care, because as long as Norman Osborn suffers and his parents are avenged, that's all that matters to him. Miles defeats Martin as he lays there in anguish and pity, begging for death, asking to be liberated from the crimes he feels responsible for. Liberated from the pain of realizing the man he's become in the eyes of a broken child who lost his father. However, Miles shows mercy by throwing him across the arena towards an open window, leading to his escape. What I love about this level in particular is it sets up Martin's redemption in a really clever and natural way. The idea of a villain becoming reformed often feels a little out of place and honestly a little unearned for me. I'm not saying villains can't be reformed and influenced down the path of good, but many often lack a justifiable reason or motivation for change. Because of the time we spent with Martin Lee at the Feast homeless shelter, we know he's an exceptional man and wants nothing but to help the most unfortunate. We know there's a light within the darkness because we've seen it with our own eyes, which makes his inevitable path towards the journey of redemption more believable and a natural conclusion for his arc to follow. The final mission featuring Mr. Negative is definitely one of my favorites in the entire game. It's a mission that concludes the journey of redemption with clarity and sacrifice as Martin gives up his powers and abilities used for destruction and villainy, instead giving them a new meaning. In a quest to save a broken Peter Parker and help him overcome the rage and guilt within him, Martin and Miles enter his mind and find nothing but madness and despair. Tormented by his villains and overwhelmed with tragedy, Lee discovers what it truly means to become a hero. Because Peter could have quite easily embarked on a selfish pursuit to hunt down the man who murdered his uncle, he could have destroyed his foes that haunt his memories every time he rests his eyes. Yet his foes are still left breathing, and Martin finally understands what it means to be a savior. As the two traverse the Spider-Man's mind, they eventually reach the symbiote hive mind. However, unlike the others, this one is different. It's stronger, more destructive, and requires much more than a simple grenade to liberate Peter from his internal trauma. Which leads to an opportunity of redemption, a sacrifice where Martin can finally give up the role of Mr. Negative and use his powers to heal the unfortunate souls, reminding him of the man he once was and the hero New York needs him to be.
Where are you gonna go?
To set things right. Your way.
The story of Martin Li's redemption is probably one of my favourites in the entire series. It's a well-written tale of corruption and how your darkest fears and desires can be manifested and manipulated into an alter ego that wants nothing but to destroy and hurt the most innocent of victims. However, what this character teaches us is it's never too late. You can always emerge from the darkness, you can always abandon your quest of self-destruction to instead embrace the path of the hero. It's an inspiring story of overcoming a negative influence and finding the strength to move forward and reinvent yourself as something new, something better, something, dare I say, positive. Like and subscribe for more content in the future, and I'll see you in the next video.